This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Episode 677, my friends. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about branding. Why do you have to create a brand? What does that even mean? And you know what's always interesting to me is who else are you competing with, right? We're competing with everybody, right? Not just even in our category. So it's like, oh my God, the attention, the fight for attention never, ever ends. So a brand hopefully can help your company with that. But how do you do it? How do you create it? How do you know what it is? How do you think it's going to work? And you know what? Sometimes people stumble into brands, right? Or companies stumble into brands, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But there is an art and a science to it. Today I'm joined by Stefan Maritz. He is based in Holland. That's his link tree right there on the bottom. linktr.ee/Stefan Maritz, Stefan Maritz. If you don't want me to spell stuff to you, watch the live stream and watch the video version on Spotify, because it's so much better than me spelling out words or URLs. So let's get him on the show. Find out why brand matters. How do we do it better? And how does it actually drive revenue? Stefan, welcome to the show.
There you go. It's great to be here.
Nice to see you. Always great to see somebody with a microphone in their face so we know they sound good. It is MacBook Pro microphones. They don't do the trick. So if you're going to come on
they
podcast,
certainly do not.
They do not, right? But you'd be shocked how many executives, that's all they have. Can't spend $80 or $100 on a microphone. But hey, welcome to the show. And let's talk about branding. So it seems to me that a lot of people still think about branding a little bit like, wishy-washy. How do we measure it? Does it matter? Does it not? But where do we start? Why do we need a brand? And how do we create one for a company out of the gate? I know that's a lot of loaded questions to get us going.
Yeah, I think just straight off the bat, the first thing to get off is a brand is not a logo and a name. This is the common misconception: is it's just pretty designs, a typeface, colors, what you put out there in the world. That's the one side of the coin, and the other side is it's just something the marketing team does, like SEO or social media. You get out there and you start doing branding, but the reality of the story is that it's obviously much more than that. The logo, the typeface, the name, that is only the tip of the iceberg. And if we get very technical, it's only one piece of the puzzle of about 8 elements of the brand blueprint or the essence. And it's not just the marketing team. It is every interaction with everyone, everything at a company builds a brand. The brand is that perception that someone holds, and the branding comes down to anything that basically molds or shapes that perception out there in the mind of the audience. Now, sometimes it is controlled, and other times it's obviously not. But to build a brand, you have to control as much of that as possible, and to get out the gate, it's something very few companies do when they start, is to actually start with a brand strategy. It usually comes a bit more onto the radar when there's funding rounds and it gets really serious, and you realize that the logo or the name you chose when you started the thing in your garage is not going to cut it. That's when the thought really kind of comes into play. But what I always kind of want to teach founders and teams at growing companies is, give thought to this right from the get-go, and you've got a foundation to build your house on, and you're not building your house on sand.
Well, who wants to build their house on sand? I mean, even though living on the beach sounds like a good idea, but maybe not building the house right there. Now, what's interesting to me is when you talk about every interaction really builds the brand. And I think sometimes, we don't just want to talk about startups. We don't just want to talk about established companies, like somewhere in the middle maybe. But especially when you have like a new company, it starts with the founders, right? Like, how do they behave out in public? How are they seen? How are they viewed? And then also the people that work there, right? Especially like the first, 10, 20 employees probably. And then, of course, the bigger you grow, I'm thinking about American Airlines. every interaction with them builds their brand, instills trust, or maybe it doesn't, right?
Or breaks it down.
So how do you ensure from the gate, out of the gate, that you have the right brand and you have a good brand? I mean, I know there is CEOs of companies, like, they don't have the best brand. They're not as visible, or they're not necessarily as um, representative of what it is the company they're building is actually trying to do. So how do you kind of, let's stick with startups for a second. How do you make sure you're off to the right race?
So I think there's an important topic you just touched on. Number one is the first and foremost thing is that your founder is not the brand. I think we live in a time when it becomes more and more important to give a little bit of attention to the people brands, especially at the company. Obviously, because people buy from people at the end of the day, and people help solidify the perception. They help shape the brand, but it's always a bit of a trouble situation when the founder's personality becomes the personality of the brand. It's not a situation that you actually want, and it's not sustainable, because then the company is one with the founder, which at some point maybe you want to sell, or maybe you want to retire, or just kind of step out of the business, and you don't want that company to be tied so much to your face and relying so much on everything that you put out into the world. Yet it obviously does help. But I think to the second part of the question, how do you set this up right, is a brand strategy is often perceived as this massive kind of document and like very technical piece of collateral that you have to work through. But in essence, it's actually just the thought process that you need to take a moment to think through. Like, what are we going to do? What are we going to sell? Who are we going to sell this to? How do we want this brand to be perceived? And what is the experience that we want the audience on the other side to walk away with? And then how do we build this up? Are there specific colors we choose? Is there something in a name that we can leverage? Do we have the right attributes, the right associations that we can put in place? So basically, if I can use a restaurant as an example, what's the vibe that you're going to create? What do you want people to experience the moment they walk through the door? How do you want your serving clientele to operate? How do you want the guests to experience it? Are you putting out 5-star food, or are you putting out fast food? This needs to be designed, and the better it is designed up front, the better the better you can mold what needs to come around it. You've got to, like, once again, I'm referring to like a foundation of a house or a blueprint. You need to build according to your plan, and your brand strategy is that plan. Like, how do you position? Is the market super crowded? How do you differentiate yourself from the competition? How do you stand out? The more you think about these things, the better equipped you are to build a brand out there. And the problem is that oftentimes businesses start with an idea from a founder, and more often than not, founders are not marketing minded people. They don't start with, I'm going to build a massive brand in mind. They start with the problem in mind. And then what follows are usually, I want to get sales. I need money. And those two then kind of goes into a direction, and brand is oftentimes left behind. And then you get to situations where your product just can't carry it any further, or there's bad experiences that kind of sink the company or the experience in the market. But it really comes down to putting some time aside right at the beginning to just think about what you want to put out into the world and how people are going to experience it.
What's interesting to me on a person being the brand or not being the brand is, it's kind of like this podcast, right? I mean, can I sell the Business Storytelling Show without being on it? According to Heather Osgood, I can, right? In fact, sometimes they might want to buy it, and then they want to keep me on for a little while, and then have somebody else kind of transition in. So there is ways to like peel your way away from a brand that you've been associated with. But do you think, like, when people start companies, the founder becomes the face just because they didn't think about branding, and it just happens because there's nothing else to even like put your hat on?
Sometimes I think it really also comes down to the specific founder. Some people are a little bit more kind of vocal out there, a little bit more frontline, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it is directly selling, whether it's networking. In the case where you've got let's call them frontline founders, they naturally become very much part of that brand. They live and breathe the experience, and people associate their presence and their interactions with the founder directly with the company, which can be a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes, obviously, or most of the times, these founders are obviously super passionate about what they do put out into the world. So they come with something that oftentimes your employees are not going to bring to the table, unless you like pay them a significant amount of money, which startups usually don't have. But it's the founder lives and breathes it right from the get-go. And the more vocal, the more present they are on social media and networking, the more the brand is built around them and the more leverage they have. But this also comes with the problem that the harder it becomes to separate the brand from them. But in many, many cases around the world, obviously, there is very strong brands built on strong personal brands. So if you've got a strong personal brand, you've got a strong following and community, it becomes much easier to launch a product or a company. And I think an easy example here to kind of point out is every celebrity nowadays have a liquor brand. Like, if you're not selling tequila or vodka or gin, then are you even a Hollywood star? And that concept around the ease of launch that they get with products, like they just need to spawn a brand and then use their own presence, personality, following and fame to push that brand to a point where a lot of people buy it and then they can sell it. That's the extreme case of how a founder can leverage their own personal brand to successfully launch a company. But it's not always the case if you've got a very silent, introverted founder that's not maybe like very present on LinkedIn or other social media channels. It's not always the case.
It's just very interesting. The other thing I found interesting is when I look at your background, you kind of brand yourself or explain yourself publicly as brand first, content second, all around marketing, Swiss Army knife or whatever, right? So very international today here. But let's talk about, what does that mean, being brand first, content second? Like, how does that look in practice, I guess? And then what's third?
Well, third comes everything else that's required to come. So just on the brand first, content second. So first of all, just a little bit background. I studied marketing, and when I was much younger, fell in love with the psychology part of it, the brand side. I realized that if you've got a strong brand, everything else just kind of follows this. To put it into numbers, the more famous a brand is, the less resources they need to spend on getting someone to want or buy their product. So basically, as brand fame grows, your cost of acquisition or cost of goods sold come down. And that is also how you obviously measure your return of investment on brand. But if you get your brand in the right place, your offering, your differentiation, your complete strategy around what you're putting out into the world, how are you going to beat the category leader? How are you going to beat your competition? Why would people want to buy you? And along with that, get a great experience out there that people want to talk about and tell their friends and colleagues about, then you start winning. But you can only communicate your brand into the world and shape perceptions if you're doing a very good job with your content nowadays. Like, social media is everything. People consume media on social media every day in different forms. We are not getting away from it. So your content marketing on your website, on the internet, on social media, what you put out there, is your primary driver of shaping your brand to a mass market. It's not so much the newspaper or the television anymore as it was a few years ago. But if you can solidify your brand, get the experience in the right place, get people to understand why they should choose you over the category leader, and then tell a great story on social media, you're winning. And then what comes third? Whatever you need to come third. Different brands of different channels, different tactics that they can employ. So is it paid media? Cool. Paid media goes much further if you've got a strong brand or if people already know about you. Your social media is much stronger. Your SEO efforts are way more effective if you've got a strong brand. So that's where the brand first, content second comes from. And everything else you can really just plug in.
Yeah, it's, a lot of people, they say, oh, I'm revenue first, I'm whatever first, something like that. And of course, I mean, I'm sure you will take all the revenue you can get too. So do I, right? Bring it on. Send all the money you want to send my way. But it's not really revenue. Like, revenue is the outcome, right, of having a good brand and solving a problem for your customers, and then being there when they need help, or is it not?
100%. If you can think of it throwing a stone into a pond, the moment the stone hits the water, that's your brand. The ripples are everything that follows. It's the interest, it's the demand, it's the inbound leads or the sales, it's the word of mouth. Yeah, so revenue is the result of having a company or a brand that solves the need of people out there. So the reason they buy is because they want something you have, whether it is shoes that fit their style or it is a B2B program that makes their life easier and can track the leads on their website. That is what it comes down to. But the stronger the brand is, the more well known you are, the more mental availability you will enjoy, and the more people will want your brand. So basically, people will like consider you when they want to buy something that is within your category or that fits the bill of what you are selling out there.
What's like the bare minimum when it comes to creating your brand? Like, what do you have to? I mean, when you talk about the content, I mean, you have to know what like your content tilt is, right? Like, what are you going to talk about? What do you stand for? What do you know something about? I mean, it's like this show, right? 677 episodes into this, I cannot have any more people on the show, Stefan, that want to talk about why storytelling is important. Like we've covered that to death, right? It was like the first episode, probably. So like you have to figure out what are you going to talk about, how are you going to talk about it, how do you keep hitting it from different areas. But once you get started, what are like the top 3 things you need to know about this is the brand, this is how we're going to move forward, and then certainly you can expand it, I assume, as you're growing.
Yeah, so just my first little note there is that a story is what follows a brand. Your brand is the reason the story is being told, not so much the story. So if you think of movie adaptations, for instance, think of your brand as like the source material. You can tell the story in many, many different ways, but it needs to come from somewhere. And once again, that bare minimum is outlining what you want to put out there. So if we want to break this up into pillars, for instance, your product marketing pillar is here's what we have. This is how our product is different from that of our competition. This is why you want to buy it. This is how it's going to solve X, Y, and Z for you and make your life better. The branding experience or the branding pillar is really what's the reason to believe? What's the story here? Why do we exist in the first place? What's the purpose? Like, why should I care about your product that is very similar to the next one? There's so much overlap out there, and to differentiate yourself on a product is nearly impossible nowadays. And if you do, someone else will just catch up very, very quickly because that's the world we live in. So your brand is that psychological level that sets you apart from the competition, that gives people something to believe in. Why would anyone buy a Harley Davidson? Like it's just a motorcycle, but it's not just a motorcycle. You can tell anyone who rides a Harley Davidson that it's just a motorcycle, and they're going to be like, no, it's an idea. There's a culture connected to it, and that feeling is the brand. That perception that you have of riding out on a Saturday afternoon with your friends, for instance, that is the brand. And yes, it's an engine with 2 wheels that is no different than most other engines with 2 wheels, but there's an ideology that is connected to that specific motorcycle, and that is a brand.
You know, I talk a lot about unseating the incumbent, right? So and this is technology, I guess, but I mean, I use Restream to live stream. I use Spotify for podcasters to distribute my podcast. I use Apple products, right? Whether they're better or not than Android at this point doesn't even make any difference anymore, but everything is connected, right? I use a Yeti mic, I use this kind of camera, all these different things. So to unseat those incumbents, it's actually really hard. Or Grammarly, I think, was one of the best examples. Why do I need to change away from Grammarly? Like, why? It works just fine. So you have like the incumbents in a category, and then you have new people coming in, or you have other people expanding or whatnot. What are the tips that you have when it comes to branding to like take a piece of the incumbent's pie, so to speak?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? Differentiation. So I think Grammarly is a great example because anyone who comes in who wants to compete with writing assistant, virtual writing assistant, is competing with Grammarly. Why? Because Grammarly was just I don't even know if they were the first one. They were just the ones to make it to the top. So rule of thumb is you always compete with the industry leader. Unless you're launching something that is completely new, then you're just competing with general awareness and perception in the market. But in any case, if you launch a company, you are competing with the industry leader. Whether you consider them as part of your like primary competition set or not, people need to have a reason to choose you over that category leader. So if someone goes shopping, they've already got like a short list of maybe 3 to 4 brands that they would like to buy. And then maybe there's a newcomer that they might explore, but they're going to default to, why should I rather buy this than the industry leader or the household name that I'm very used to, or that my friend uses, or that my father uses. And it really starts with standing out. Now, standing out visually and on the internet is not an easy thing, but you have to kind of look at your competitor set, and especially the industry leader, and ask yourself the question, like, how am I going to be different than what they're doing? How am I going to make my website specifically tell my target audience why they should buy me rather than the industry leader, while at the same time you really just want to break through the noise, use a color that has never been seen in the industry, come with a personality that is absolutely unheard of. I think the brand cereal is a great example here. Liquid Death as well. Obviously, it's water. It's just water in a can with a great branding that stood out. And I think Liquid Death is a great example of just branding something that is so common, and so there's so many options out there, but people are spending money on that specific can rather than the plastic, because there's purpose, there's death to plastic, and there's this ugly skull on these cans. So the big question that you have to answer right at the beginning is, why me, and how do people differentiate me from the rest?
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting, not to keep harping on Grammarly, but Grammarly, when they first started, they were not any leader of anything. In fact, I thought that was pretty bad the way it worked at the beginning. I was like, why would I ever use this? And now I'm a fanboy, no doubt. Stefan, time always flies when you're having fun. Episode 677, almost in the books here. 45 seconds or 60 seconds or so. Tell us, who should reach out to you? Why should they connect with you? And how do they connect with you?
Cool. So basically, marketing professionals who want to expand a little bit into the realm of branding. So everything we were talking about, founders, naturally, if you're starting a company, if you're sitting on an investment round, if you're struggling to stand out, please connect with me on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. And then my newsletter, or the newsletter of CXL that I'm currently heading up as well. So yeah, the link tree will get you there.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, and we're out.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite